Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. My name is Emma, and today I'm going to run through everything that I've been working on in the last month. Plus, maybe I accidentally bought some new yarns, so we might have some future cast-ons coming too. First up, we have a finished piece. It's also a new cast-on that I didn't share previously, and this is a beanie that I've made for my friend. So I kind of just winged this beanie. I looked at a couple patterns and like loosely kind of guesstimated what I wanted to do for this particular beanie. Unfortunately, this hasn't worked out. So for this beanie, I used this kind of black yarn that I had from Temu that I had actually bought for a prior project. So I just had some leftovers kind of like lying around. It is 80% wool and 20% polyester. And then I knit this beanie in a 1x1 rip on 4.5mm needles. First up, this yarn's quite thick and stretchy, and doing it on 4.5mm needles was just a little bit tiresome on my arms and wrists. So I didn't enjoy knitting this piece up. I did do a folded brim on it. So I did a provisional cast on and just connected that. So I used that Judy's Magic bind on and did a really nice looking folded brim. I like how it looks. It's just probably not the right type of brim for this hat. Maybe if the top wasn't all ribbing, it would look a little bit more effective because you'd be able to see the difference between the brim and the rest of the hat. Whereas currently it kind of just all looks like one. I intended to kind of knit it so that you could either just wear it so kind of long looking on the head, or you could fold it and wear it kind of flat on the head. But folding it, like, it is thick and it just does not look right. So I kind of changed my plans as I was like knitting the piece up and just decided to put some length on it and then do the decreases. Now the fit of this beanie is all off. It is on the larger side. It still like fits fine because it's like a ribbed and it kind of like cinches in and snugs to your head, but it's not like tight. So if this loosens with wear, it might be a bit too big. So sizing's a little bit off in terms of circumference. We need to go a little bit smaller. And then because of these decreases that I've done here, they make a little bit of like a point to the hat, like this. So when you wear the hat, it looks a little bit funny on. This length probably needs to be a little bit shorter for it to look right. But because this yarn is so like thick and it's a little bit more like stiff, it doesn't like fold or drape or look nice. It just, that like point just kind of like sticks up and it looks stupid. Just the fit of this is like just wrong. There's nothing wrong with like those techniques or the style or anything like that. It's just the combination of these techniques with this particular yarn just does not work. So I am going to rip this back and we're going to start again. So we're going to make, or loosely kind of follow in terms of pattern, the Beanie Alba by Jocelyn and Fossey. So that calls for a worsted weight yarn, which I'm pretty sure this is worsted weight, if not like thicker. And that calls for 4.5mm needles, but having already knit this on 4.5s, I might actually size up to 5s and hopefully it just knits up a little bit quicker and isn't as tiresome or like maybe on my hands as the 4.5s. I'm not going to do like the attached folded brim. I'm just going to knit the whole thing like in the picture, like flat, so that you can fold your brim at the length that you want. Because this is also a gift as well and I don't have any measurements, I think that's more appropriate for a gift knit as well. So I'm going to rip this back and then this is going to be the main kind of thing that I work on. This took me about 20 hours to knit up, but that's partially because I kept effing up the cast on and so I redid it like 5 times. So minus that, it would probably be maybe 15 to 17 hours to knit the beanie. So I'm thinking since I'm going to be sizing up, I'm going to be making it a little bit shorter than what we currently got now. Less stitches in total, that I should be able to knit this up in a couple days. So that's my goal. I'm kind of setting myself like a weekend to knit up the beanie and finish it. And so I can ship that off to my friend because he lives on the other side of the world. So it is currently winter for him at the moment, and he said he wanted a beanie. So it's coming. It's coming. Next up, we have a piece that I keep saying should be finished by the next episode, but we still have not finished our full moon cardigan yet, but we are close. We are almost there. Just a quick recap on the pattern. So this is a free pattern by Drops Design. It calls for their Drops Air yarn, which is an Aran weight, and is knit on 6mm needles. It is knit in a brioche rib. The pattern calls it English rib, but I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. You're knit top down in a raglan style. So you just start by casting on some stitches for the kind of neckline here. You do an increase round, then you establish your brioche rib, working your raglan increases up until the point that you want to separate body and sleeves. Continue to work the body flat until you get towards the bottom here where there's a chart detail to follow for this kind of loop pattern design that we've got here. You then finish with some ribbing and bind off. You then pick up your sleeve stitches and you start working brioche in the round this time. And you'll just knit that continuously all the way down until you reach the length that you're happy with. Finish with your ribbing and bind off again. And then you would pick up stitches all along your kind of neckline edge and knit a ribbed button band. For mine, I have done a slightly different button band. So I followed the steps that I followed for cardigan number 6 and knit my button band separately and then attach that just with like a single crochet on the inside. It's not the neatest, but I think the kind of style of button band with the vertical ribbing versus horizontal ribbing that the original pattern calls for looks a little bit nicer. So for my piece, I've been using a different yarn than what's called for. So I've been using 2 yarns that I picked up off Temu, both in the colour creams. The first one is cashmere yarn, which is supposedly 100% cashmere. So I'm holding 1 strand of that. And then I've also got this mohair to pair it with, which is supposedly, what are you, 30% mohair, 20% merino wool, 50% acrylic. I'm holding 2 strands of that, mainly just to use up the mohair that I've got in my stash because I have no other use for it. I'm also making mine in the size large just to account for gauge. I'd still use the same 6mm needles, but because I'm using a different yarn, my gauge isn't the same. And the size large should give me about 20-ish centimeters of positive ease, which based on the pattern measurements, it should be about equivalent to what the medium is in the pattern. So since the last update, I've spent another 25 hours working on this piece. And last time we had needles still just on this bottom ribbing here. So I finished that by doing a tubular bind off on the bottom edge there. I've then picked up and finished 1 full sleeve, and I'm about, I don't know, maybe a third to halfway through. Yeah, about halfway through the second sleeve there. So we are very close to being done. Now that I'm working sleeves, I kind of have to do like magic loop, and I don't like doing that, and I'm just finding it a little bit more tedious to work brioche in the round. So we've kind of slowed down our pace and our motivation to work on it. It's still quick to knit because we're using such large needles, but at the same time I have to keep like changing the needle positions and cables and whatnot, and it's just, I don't know, that's just, it's not been my most reached for knit because of that reason. Now, thoughts on this. I think first we'll talk about the sleeve. So first things first, when I picked up the sleeve, if you are making the same pattern, I would recommend picking up some additional stitches on the underarms, because you can see that I have some very large holes in the sides, and they are quite noticeable when wearing the piece, that there's these big ass holes in that underarm. So I need to go in afterwards and like tighten those up, but to avoid such large holes, picking up an extra stitch or two and then joining it together in like your first round will eliminate those holes. Second of all, working brioche in the round, it is different to working flat. And I feel like my gauge has also changed. So I don't know if you can really see in this particular lighting, but there's a very obvious line here where I've switched from flat to in the round. And you can kind of see like against my, I don't know if this is going to be obvious. I might have to do some flat shots of this, but my sleeve brioche is quite a lot more loosey-goosey than the body brioche, and it's quite obvious actually with the pattern section that I've done at the bottom there. You'll be able to see the difference. By the way, I added the pattern onto the sleeves. So what I did for that, I had 55 stitches, I think, or 50 stitches. No, I had 50 stitches on my needles, and the pattern repeat is 6 stitches or 8 stitches. Anyways, I can't remember. I had 2 stitches spare. So on the most like inner part, I just left those stitches as is. So you can see here, there's like a line, can you see that? Just of like a single rib in between the kind of pattern. So it's totally really not that noticeable. When I point it out, you can kind of see that it's there, but because it's on the inside of the sleeve, it's not noticeable at all. And like I could have worked it out and done like an extra decrease or something to like join that into the pattern and make it look a little bit more seamless, but I don't think it's really the end of the world. So I did do that. But yeah, going back to like brioche in the round, yeah, I think in my next project, because I did buy some yarn to make this in black, I think I might size down on my needles for the sleeve because it's just a little bit more loosey-goosey, and I think it's quite noticeably more loosey-goosey than the flat knitting. So I think sizing down on my needles will help with that. Also, when you knit brioche in the round, you've got 2 different rows that you need to follow, and you really need to pay a little bit more attention because I've got some mistakes in mine. There's one right there where like I don't know, slipped an extra stitch or done something wrong there, and it's just left some like weird looking stitches throughout my piece. There's a couple mistakes on that first sleeve where I wasn't fully paying attention to like what round I was on or like what slip stitches, slipping, knitting, whatnot, you know how it is. So yeah, brioche in the round is not as easy as knitting brioche flat. Brioche flat, I was just doing the same stitch on both sides, so it was a lot easier and a lot quicker. What else did I do? Now for bind offs. So I did 2 different bind offs, partially because I was like mindlessly knitting and kind of forgot that I needed to do some setup rows for my bind off, and I had already reached like the length and ribbing that I wanted, so I just did standard bind off, or standard Italian bind off I should say. So on the bottom ribbing I did the tubular bind off, and on the sleeves I just did like standard Italian bind off. So the tubular bind off I wanted to try because I realized that there was a difference, because sometimes there are setup rows, sometimes there aren't setup rows. I didn't really fully understand the difference. I thought that I had done my Italian bind off wrong on my prior cardigans. I was like, oh well, I'll do it right this time. But turns out I didn't do it wrong. There's just 2 different styles. There's like just Italian bind off, and then there's tubular Italian bind off. So the tubular one, you do like 2 setup rows where you slip a stitch and it creates like a little tube feeling, but you can clearly like see a line like in the ribbing, which just makes that edge look a little bit more obvious than just doing Italian bind off where it just kind of like finishes. I'll do a close up to show you guys that. So I'm not loving how the tubular bind off looks. I also read after the fact somewhere else someone recommends that you size down when you do your setup rows to stop it from flaring. I'm not sure exactly what they mean by flaring because I don't think this flares at all, but maybe it might look a little bit better if you sized down so you had smaller stitches. I don't know. But yeah, I'm not really a fan in this fabric anyways of the tubular bind off. You'll see that I've done it in another one coming up as well. But yeah, that's what I did on mine. So the bind offs are a little bit different. It's not really super noticeable. Also, this ribbing on the bottom, even though I did do the increases, like I was, as per the pattern said, it is a very tight ribbing on the bottom. So again, in my next piece, I'll probably add in some additional increases to make that ribbing section a little bit bigger than what I've got currently. So yeah, we've only got a little bit more on that one to do, and then, dare I say it, we should have a finished piece next episode, being the full moon cardigan. We should. Okay, next one I'm just going to quickly talk about because it's we haven't really done anything on it. It's basically the same as the full moon cardigan, just different yarn and slightly different knit pattern. So this one is my Deep Woods cardigan. All I've done is knit a little bit more length on this because I had so many things that I was up to a stage where I needed to like film or wind yarn or do something that I didn't have anything I could just like pick up and knit on. So I decided to pick this up and knit a couple rows. But yeah, I've basically done nothing, just a couple rows, nothing else has changed. I'm not even going to go over this because we haven't really done anything. But she's still classified as a whip for now. Alrighty, next up we have our Zipper Sweater Light. So this is the gift knit that I've been working on, and then I'm going to make myself one basically exactly the same afterwards. So this is a Pattern by Petite Knit. One is a top-down knit in a raglan style. For this one, you start by knitting the ribbed collar flat. You do like a provisional cast on using the Judy's Magic cast on. I'm not sure, is it Judy or Jenny? I can never remember. I'm pretty sure it's Judy. Anyways, you knit that flat, you seam it together, and then you start working your piece. You do some short rows for some shaping along the back, and then just continue to work down with your raglan increases. This top yoke section is knit flat up until the point that you've got the right length for your zipper. Then you join in the round and you continue to work down in the round thereafter. Once you've done all your raglan increases, you can separate body and sleeves, and then just continue to knit down until you're happy with the length, finishing in some ribbing. You then pick up your sleeve stitches and just start working them in the round. There are some very gradual decreases that you can work into the sleeve so it tapers, and then you just again finish with ribbing for the sleeves. Lastly, we would then install our zipper into this gap here, and then she'll be done. So for my piece, I'm using the same cashmere yarn that I got off Temu, this time in the colour Coffee. So I'm holding 2 strands of that together plus the supporting yarn that it comes with. And I've sized up in my needles to 4.5mm needles for my piece. I've also gone up half a size for the ribbing and everything as well. Now sizing. I'm making, well, initially I casted mine on as a medium, and because based on my gauge swatch, I was fairly close to pattern gauge. But as I was working this flat, I measured my gauge and I was way off by 4 or 5 stitches. So I kind of adjusted as I went and continued to knit these raglan increases until I got to a size large. I thought I was making a bigger size than large, but turns out the body stitch count is for a large. The sleeves, I think, are an extra large or an extra extra large. I can't remember now. So my sizing is way off. So I've just basically been trying this on and basing it on fit versus the actual pattern. So I ended up knitting a lot longer down for my zipper gap because the zipper is super long. Also on my raglans, I kind of continued to knit down a little bit longer than where the raglan increases went to, just to get that underarm to sit a little bit lower down as well. The fit of this is actually really good. So I thought that I was knitting to an extra large, but stitch count comes to a large. So I think when it comes to making a piece for myself, I will just follow the pattern, the large size. But for the neck collar, I find this very, very tight, and the medium and the large are exactly the same stitch counts. So I think I will try cast on more stitches for the collar, and then maybe I'll decrease down and then start working my raglans to a size large. Does that make sense? I don't know. Anyways, so since the last update, I've spent another 30 hours working on this piece. Last time we were somewhere in the body section here. So I finished the entire body section, the ribbing, and bound off. I did tubular bind off on this one too, but I did size down in my needles. So I sized down by, I think I accidentally sized down by 3. So it was like a 0.75 or 0.25 instead of like a half size. I don't think it really matters too much, but yeah, 2 sizes down, and then I did the tubular bind off. The only reason I really did this is because I kind of wanted to see if it would make a difference in my thoughts on the piece, and the pattern did call for a tubular bind off, so I kind of wanted to follow the pattern to a T. So I think in this yarn you can't see that kind of line as obviously as you can in the other fabric, but I can still see it in real life, like it's still there. I don't think it necessarily looks bad, but I don't know. I'm also noticing already that this bind off, it's kind of loosey-goosey on the bottom. So I don't know if that was just because of my gauge, I did it too loosely or what, but I don't know. I think when it comes to knitting my piece, I might go half a size down again. So I'll still knit my body in 4.5s. But I'll go down to 3.5s because I think I went down to just 4s for this ribbing. So I think I'll go down a full needle size for my ribbing when it comes to making my piece. Also, since last time, I've picked up my sleeve stitches and I've started working sleeve in the round. I have been doing decreases on this one, but I've been doing them far less frequently than what the pattern calls for because I kind of like big sleeves. So every 20 kind of rows, I've been doing a decrease stitch. So it's a very slow, very gradual decrease. It's not really decreasing at all. And when we get down to the cuff, I'll probably do some additional decreases before I do the ribbing to make sure we're at the right stitch count for that ribbing. But yeah, so that's where we're up to. So just going to continue working the sleeves. I don't know, I don't think this will be finished by next check-in, but I reckon we'll be very close to being finished by next check-in for sure. And last whip that I've got this month is our ribbed tee. So this is a pattern by Knitting for Olive. It calls for their Knitting for Olive merino or silk, so a fingering weight yarn, and it's knit on 3mm needles. This one's super simple construction. It's just a raglan style top-down knit and a 2x2 rib. So you start by casting on, you have slightly smaller needles to cast on, you do a 1x1 rib kind of neckline here. You then move on to your larger needles and establish a 2x2 ribbing. There's some German short rows worked into the back to give it some shaping. Otherwise, you're just knitting that 2x2 rib down, doing your raglan increases until you reach the point of wanting to separate body and sleeves. Do the usual, cast on some additional stitches for your underarms, and then you're just continuing to knit down basically until you hit a length that you're happy with. There are some decreases on the sleeves, and this pattern does come with a short sleeve and a long sleeve version. I am making mine in a long sleeve version. Now for mine, I'm not knitting with the yarn called for. I'm instead using this merino blend yarn that I got off Temu. So it is 70% merino, 20% nylon, 10% silk. And I'm holding it with a strand of supposedly 100% silk. Now, because I'm using a different yarn, my gauge is a little bit off. I played around with needle sizes and I've gone with a 3.25 needle to get me kind of similar to the pattern, but also like an opaque fabric. And I'm making mine in a size large to account for the gauge differences. I'm otherwise following the pattern to a T, but I did do a tubular cast on the top there that you kind of see. So since last episode, I've now got to the point of separating body and sleeves. So to be honest, I wasn't going to actually work on this at all. It was kind of just sitting on the side because I had to play around with that silk yarn. So if you remember my last update, I totally underestimated the amount of the silk yarn that this would require, and part of the reason I picked this pattern was to hold those two strands together to use up those yarns in my stash, and I thought that I would have just the right amount to get this piece finished. It turns out I was totally wrong with the meterage on the yarn, and so I had to either rip back or buy more yarn. I did buy more yarn, but the yarn that I originally brought was now discontinued, so I had to buy a different yarn, and the thread, it was a lot thinner, or not a lot thinner, but it was a little bit thinner than the original silk that I had, so I didn't know if it was going to work, so I tried to return it. They did that thing where they're like, keep it and we'll just refund you. So since I had the yarn, I was like, I'm going to make this work instead of ripping back. We're going to make it work. So I've now just switched when I got to the point of separating sleeves. I basically worked through the last ball of the yarn that I had, and then I got to the point of separating sleeves, and now I've switched to the new silk. So I did end up winding half of that silk yarn onto a winder because I planned to hold it double. And so I did start doing that, but it was a little bit thicker than my prior stitches. So I then went back to tried it with just one strand of that new silk with the merino, and it's slightly thinner, but it looks like it's less obvious that there's any change in like yarn type if I just do one strand of that new silk. Two strands, it was just looking a little bit thicker than before. So I kind of rewound that yarn for nothing, which annoys me because the wound yarn is just like a tangly mess. It's super bad. But anyways, that's where I'm up to on this. So I've just put it on stitch holders so that I could try the piece on and make sure that I was happy with the sizing and whatnot. So I'm yet to do that. I've got to go slip this on and make sure that we are looking good in terms of size. So yeah, that's where we're up to on this one. Again, I don't think she's going to be much of a priority. I think so. In terms of width, I think my focuses are going to be exactly the same as like last episode. So I need to get that full moon cardigan finished, and I'm so close to getting it finished. Like if it's not finished by next episode, like something's wrong with me. I'll probably continue to work on that zipper sweater, even though I actually realized I've got more time up my sleeve for that one than I thought I did. I thought I needed to have it done by March for Mother's Day, but Mother's Day is in May. So I've actually got a couple extra months up my sleeve, which is great because if I finish that one, then I can start working on one for myself. And it's just nice to have the prior one handy so I can kind of compare and contrast in terms of the size, because I like how this one's fitting on me. So I'm going to be making mine slightly differently, like in terms of sizing, but then it should equal the same size, if you know what I mean. So it'd be nice to have the two to kind of be able to compare one by one, like next to each other. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyways, I've got to do that beanie, but that should be hopefully a very quick knit. I've got to rip it back and re-knit that. I was literally waiting for this to like rip back just so I could film the actual beanie like in its current state before I rip it back. So now that I've filmed this update, I will be jumping on that one straight away. And then rib tee will probably be the last thing that I work on if I've got some time in between or I'm a little bit bored in between my projects. We'll probably continue to work on her. Deep Woods cardigan is just going to be sidelined. But I also have some other projects that I want to work on. So one of the pieces that I want to cast on like next or like very soon, I don't know if I will cast it on next now because things in my head, like my excitement levels keep changing. But I did knit up a little gauge swatch for the Diana Black Sheep sweater. And I was going, I guess, quite excited to cast this on, but then at the same time I'm like, this is a piece that's going to require like a lot of work and a lot of time. So like, because I've got so many things on the needles at the moment, I kind of want to finish a few pieces because when you've got so many pieces on the needles, you end up like switching or like mainly focusing on one piece and then you put it down to focus on another piece, and then you've got to come back to that piece and you kind of forget, like you lose your like flow a little bit. So I kind of want to do the Diana sweater when I don't really have much else on the needles so that I can really concentrate on getting it done, because I feel like this one's going to be a long slog. But this pattern is the Diana Black Sheep sweater by Sally Murr and Joanna Osborne. It's a fingering weight knit on 3mm needles. The pattern is a free pattern, but it is a kind of like an old pattern, so it really lacks a lot of detail in terms of what you meant to do. But from what I grasp from reading the pattern and reading people's notes that have made the pattern, is that the entire thing is meant to be knit flat and then seamed together. So like sleeves and everything are meant to be knit flat and then seamed. The pattern doesn't actually give you any specific instructions on seaming though. But the piece is knit from the bottom up. It's kind of like that more drop shoulder kind of construction. Just ribbing details on the hem, the cuffs, and the neckline, and then you've got your little sheep pattern all over the sweater. One of them will be black, the rest will be white. So for my piece, I'm going to be using the same kind of cashmere yarn that I've been using for a lot of my projects lately, so purchased off Temu. So I've got that in a red, black, and cream. I was a little bit concerned with the cream sheep, because I do have another yarn that's slightly different composition, but it's a crisp white. But I think the cream actually looks perfectly fine with the red. So I'd rather use up that cream because I don't like it, and then my fabric feels consistently the same throughout, you know. But I'm holding each of those strands of cashmere with a corresponding colour mohair. So I do have two slightly different mohairs. So the red and the cream are 30% mohair, 20% merino, 50% acrylic. And the black is 55% mohair, 25% silk wool, and 20% acrylic. So a little bit different, but basically the same. All from Temu, by the way. So I've knit my little gauge swatch up on 3mm needles, same as the pattern. I'm basically on gauge, so I'm going to be making the size medium for mine. Now, in terms of modifications, because we're going to have to make some to make this work, the pattern's so super duper vague. I prefer to knit in the round, so I'm going to try do majority of my piece knitting in the round. I'm still going to go bottom up because even though I prefer to work top down, but I don't know, it's going to be a bit too hard to like re-engineer the whole piece to do it top down for me. And also the sheep, like I feel like the way that the stitches are currently facing, like with the bottom of the V for the little feet and then the top of the V for like the little ears and the top of their body, I think the sheep pattern just looks nice with the stitches facing this way. So being knit bottom up versus top down, your stitches would be facing the other way and the sheep would look a little bit skewy. So I'm still going to go bottom up, try and knit in the round as much as possible. I might actually start with the sleeve just so that I can get the hang of it, and if I make some mistakes, it's like less work to rip back if I'm starting on a sleeve. I've also got to do, I'm going to do this like ladder back kind of situation for the color work. I haven't done that before. This is my first time attempting it. It's not the greatest. There's a few like puckering bits and the colors like randomly showing through at one point, but that's what I'm going to attempt to do in terms of managing my yarn for color work. The only other change I'll do is like a folded collar if I've got enough yarn left, because I think that will look nice with a bit more of a like a collar than just a single layer. And yeah, it will just be like sizing changes. I think for the sleeve I might have to do like an extra sheep or two in terms of length because the sleeves are always too short on me. But you've got to kind of stick to another chart repeat because you don't want to have like a half a sheep. So I might do an extra sheep or two in terms of length, we'll see. But yeah, that's going to be the Diana sweater. So like I said, I think I don't know if I'll start casting this on in the next month or not. I want to, but I also, I don't know. I think it just needs to sit on the side for a moment until I've cleared out some of my projects and I can really focus on this a little bit more because she's probably going to be a long vlog, I feel. So I just filmed my what am I going to knit in 25 kind of video based on yarn that I already have in my stash, plus some additional pieces that I'm like, hey, if I have some time, I may end up buying some yarn for these particular pieces. Anyways, I've already got a bag of yarn here, and as you can see, she's quite colourful. So if you watch that video, you know that that doesn't align to anything that I had highlighted in my like future knitting plans. So yeah, ignore that video and everything that I said I was going to knit, because that's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I also ended up buying some yarn online, which hasn't arrived yet. So I think when that yarn arrives, I will do a mini yarn haul, because I actually brought commonly used yarn this time. So I'll do like a first impressions on the yarn that I did buy, along with what I've got in this bag and what I plan to make with that yarn, because oh my god, I don't know how this even happened. I was just like looking at a colorway, and then I found like a website that shipped to Australia, and then the prices were reasonable, and then I was like just going to buy enough quantity for one project, and then it led into being like, well, I'll maximize the shipping. Like, oh, I don't know, I just lost the plot. I'll do a video on that, so keep an eye out for that in the next, I don't know when that's going to go up, because I've got to wait for this yarn to arrive actually, so sometime soon that will come up. But you know, already I'm like, maybe I'll do the Sadie sweater, maybe I'll make a sweater with this one. There's another sweater that I also looked at that I was going to make. It's just, I don't know, it's getting out of control, guys. Like, I've got far too many plans and not enough time to make all of these pieces. So another thing that I'm considering doing is ripping back my Mellow Mood sweater. This has been sitting in the corner, almost finished. I just have to do the black section of the sleeve, but I just never picked it up again since putting it down. And that's mainly just because of the fabric that I've created and a few design elements that I decided I actually don't like. So this is a pattern by Julia Prio. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And it's a great beginner-friendly knit. Like, her patterns are so well written, and like everything's color-coded. There's lots of checkpoints, and she has like accompanying videos for all of her knits. So highly recommend her if you're like a beginner looking to make a sweater. This was the first sweater that I started working on, and I picked it because I like this like really simple design. This is like before I really knew anything about, like, I didn't have any preferences. I hadn't made any garments yet, right? I had just made a beanie and scarf. So in terms of like yarn weights and like some styling features, I didn't know what my preferences were yet. And this very quickly taught me what my preferences are. So first of all, the fabric on this, I've held two yarns together, which I probably didn't actually need to do, but it's created a very thick and dense fabric. It's a very heavyweight knit, so I don't enjoy the fabric on this one. I opted for the turtleneck style, which I also don't particularly like. This turtleneck is a little bit too fitted for my neck, and so I find it a little bit uncomfortable, like it's a little bit too constrictive. So I think if I was to ever do like a turtleneck situation in future, it's got to be like a really loose baggy one, not like super fitted like this one. The other thing that I don't enjoy about this is the sleeves. They are a little bit tapered, so I followed the pattern with the decreases that run down the inside seam of the sleeve there, and it doesn't look like super fitted or anything, but because this fabric is so thick and heavy, having a tapered sleeve like this, it just doesn't look right or feel right. I feel like it's got to have like a thicker wide sleeve that like cinches in at the cuff would be better for this type of fabric. So if I was to knit this particular jumper again, I would make some modifications. I would do like this shorter neckline, because she gives you two different options in terms of the neckline. I would pick a different yarn, and I wouldn't do the decreases in the sleeve. I would just continue to knit at the width that they were up here and cinch it in at the cuff. But yeah, I kind of want to repurpose the black yarn that I've got here, and it annoys me that I'm going to have to rip this back, because I spent so much time trying to get this line between the black and the tan even, given that it's like a raglan style. It's a little bit harder to know when to kind of start that line so that it's a straight line and not like an angled up line like this. So yeah, one of the yarns that I held with this was the the Abbey Road, the Wind Cries Merino, and I've got a few more black balls in my stash as well. So I think I will all up have enough if I hold it one strand, to make another sweater. And the sweater that I was kind of looking at was the Sadie sweater by Ozetta. So it's a very like kind of casual looking sweater. It's pretty basic. It's knit top down. You've got that kind of drop shoulder again. It's kind of oversized, and it has like a rolled kind of raw edge collar, I guess you would call it, on all the like hems and the cups and everything like that. So that one calls for a DK weight knit on 4mm needles. The Wind Cries, I don't think it is actually DK. It doesn't tell you the weight of the yarn, but people who have reviewed the yarn refer to it as being a DK weight yarn. So it will create quite a light, airy piece. But yeah, I think I would have enough black if I unravel this to actually make that sweater. And like, I'm never going to wear this. This is just, it's too thick, it's too heavy, it's like the neckline's uncomfortable. There's too many things about it that I don't enjoy enough. But I'm sad that I'm going to be ripping it back, because it was the first sweater that I made. Even though I didn't complete it, still the first sweater that I made. And it looks really good. Like, there's like no mistakes in this as well. From what I recall, I don't think I mucked up anything. All the stitches look really neat and nice. Like, it looks great, but it's just not going to be something that I ever end up wearing. So we'll change it. I should just be able to do enough in black. I don't know what I'm going to end up doing with the tan. My only concern is when I like rip this back is if the yarns are going to actually separate nicely, because that Abbey Road yarn is quite like fuzzy, and it might cause some problems, or like stick and knot together. So felt together, is that the right term for it? Is that what we mean by when like yarn starts felting? It's because it's like merged into the other one. So we'll have to see, but regardless, I think this needs to be ripped back. I think it's time that we put this as a fail and we say goodbye to our Mellow Mood sweater. I'm kind of sad. I'll film it though. I also filmed all the construction of this, and so it will never make it to a project vlog, but like all that footage and all that time and all that effort, like I'm so sad, but I think it needs to be done. So bye, Mellow Mood. Anyways, guys, that's it for this month. So I hope you enjoyed checking out what I was working on and what I might be working on. We'll see what we pick up. I don't know if I'm actually going to, I don't know. Do I commit to finishing pieces, or do I just start on new pieces because it brings me joy? I don't know. Anyways, if you did like this, give us a thumbs up. Let us know what you're working on as well. I always like to steal ideas, so drop it down below. And if you want to check out the pieces that I am making, there will be project blogs coming for those. There's some already up on my channel as well that you can check out. And yeah, subscribe if you want to get those updates for those when they come out. Otherwise, I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.